Welcome to In the News with Double O Des. I'm Des Bernardo, giving you my perspective on news from South Africa and the rest of the world. In this video now, I want to talk to you about something that should be really concerning to most of you. In fact, any South African citizen that pays tax, which is basically all of us. Because even when we go and buy items at a shop, we end up paying VAT, which goes into the government coffers. And as I've mentioned before, 58 cents out of every rand goes towards paying government employed salaries, and out of that 1 rand, another 22 cents goes towards paying our debt. So there's 20 cents out of every rand remaining to actually do something for the citizens. Now this is obviously a travesty. It should be the other way around. In fact, 80% should be used on us and 20% should be used towards repaying loans and or paying for government salaries. So there's quite a huge swing that needs to take place. But our government has just decided to do something and go and wine and dine the International Monetary Fund for money because they need this thing that means absolutely nothing, money. And they need this thing to do things. And this is only because I believe this. So I'll put two links to the articles as well as the IMF themselves underneath this video in the description. And I want you to actually go and read what the IMF says in their statement. And I'll go through it briefly. Then I'll attach an article from Business Tech. The headline of the articles is the conditions attached to South Africa's 70 billion IMF loan. And this is the focus of why I want to make the video. But just quickly to go to the International Monetary Fund, I'll put the link underneath to where the IMF says the executive board approves $4.3 billion in emergency support to South Africa to address the COVID-19 pandemic. So they're saying this is specifically with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is for July the 27th, so this is 2 days ago, 2020, and I'll just read the three headlines here. The COVID-19 outbreak is leading to a sharp economic contraction and significant financing needs in South Africa. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, just in case you're not sure, approved a $4.3 billion in emergency financial assistance under the Rapid Financing Instrument to support the authorities' efforts in addressing the challenging health situation and severe economic impact of the COVID-19 shock. So they call this the COVID-19 shock, and this is a rapid financing instrument, and we'll get just now as to what that exactly means. Once the pandemic is behind, there is a pressing need to ensure debt sustainability, they say, and implement structural reforms to support the recovery and achieve sustainable and inclusive growth. Now, does this sound familiar with regards to the sustainable goals of the NDP 2030, United Nations, and their Agenda 2030, and the Agenda 21, Sustainable Development Goals? So please go and read the rest of this. They don't say much about the conditions here. Obviously, they're not going to tell us how they're trying to tell our country what to do. But we'll get to that now in the article. So please go and read that, what the International Monetary Fund says about their loan assistance to South Africa. But now let's get to the Business Tech article. The conditions attached to South Africa's 70 billion rand IMF loan, because that's what it equates to. The International Monetary Fund has approved a 70 billion loan for South Africa to help the country manage the immediate consequences of the fallout from COVID-19. The Conversation Africa's editor Caroline Saudi asked Danny Bradlow to shed some light on what South Africans should expect. The first headline is, what conditions has the IMF attached to the disbursement? And this is the kicker. And this is what all of you need to understand as South African citizens. Because our government has made this decision for us. We elected this government, and this is what they are doing. And we elected this government by voting for parties, not for people. Remember that. The IMF has provided the funding through its Rapid Financing Instrument. Very important to remember that. This is designed to support countries facing an urgent need for financing due to a crisis, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. So they're calling this a crisis. The goal is to help the country face the immediate financial consequences of the crisis. As a result, the IMF provides the financing quickly and without strict conditions, they say. Okay, so they're saying this is not strict conditions. It's actually far worse, and we'll get to that just now. The country merely needs to show the IMF that it is facing a crisis, okay, that it will use the funds to deal with the crisis, in other words, it shouldn't go anywhere else, that it will cooperate with the IMF to solve the balance of payments problems caused by the crisis, and to describe the economic policies that it proposes to follow. Now, this is where things get not only murky, but become seriously dangerous, because we are supposed to be an independent republic. But yet our government is allowing an international monetary institution to describe to us what we need to do with regards to policy. And this is very murky ground. It gets worse. In some cases, the IMF may require the country to undertake certain policy actions before it can access the funds. Okay? Policy actions. What policy actions? What has Cyril gone and done to the country now? What is the IMF going to say? And if you go and watch my videos on the New World Order and the Rothschilds, you will see exactly where the IMF comes from. What policy decisions do we have to make? What policy actions do we then have to take? This is the question. In South Africa's case, the country's payment problems relates to the fact that the economy is expecting to contract by about 7% this year, and the budget deficit to increase to about 15% of GDP. Now that is madness. This means that the government will need to increase the amount it has to borrow. Given that it has been downgraded by credit rating agencies and that the economy is in bad shape, there is a substantial risk that both local and foreign investors will have a limited appetite for South African debt. This will complicate the government's efforts to finance the deficit. Look where this is going, people. If you've watched my videos, then you will know. If you have not watched the videos yet, and you are new to this channel, please watch the Question Everything series as well as the Moments in Time series. I've put them in two separate playlists. Watch them from beginning to end, and then you will know how serious this is. The IMF loan helps to solve this problem, they say. Okay? The problem is that this will complicate the government's efforts to finance the deficit. So they're saying this loan is going to help us to solve this problem. South Africa provided the requisite information to the IMF in the form of a letter of intent signed by the Minister of Finance and the Governor of the Reserve Bank, Tito Mboweni. The letter has not yet been made public. Okay? So we don't know what it says. But according to the IMF press release, South Africa seems to have informed the IMF that it intends to take certain steps to stabilize the country's finances. What are these, people? What have they sold our futures out to? This is unbelievable. This means that the government will cut government spending to reduce its need to borrow. How are they going to do this? The current disputes over public sector wages and funding for state-owned enterprises are examples of steps it could take. The government has also said it will improve the governance of state-owned enterprises and introduce reforms to stimulate a growing and inclusive economy. These reforms could include measures to improve competition in different sectors of the economy. South Africa made these undertakings in last October's medium-term budget statement and in the supplementary budget statement in June this year. This suggests that the IMF is merely expecting the country to implement the policies already announced by the government. Bad enough, as is. How will the money be dispersed? This kind of financing is provided in one payment. So they're going to get a lump sum. Okay, the IMF press statement doesn't say when the funds will be dispersed, but the goal is to make the funds available rapidly. That could be as early as August. Can you imagine how many people are standing ready, rubbing their hands to get their grubby paws on this money and loot it? I mean, they're actually getting some time to prepare. Once the funds are dispersed, the government will be free to spend them according to the National Treasury Statement. It plans to use the money to support health and frontline services, to protect the vulnerable, drive job creation, support economic reform, and stabilize public debt. The problem is this, and this is very, very simple. In Cyril's last speech, he used one sentence where he said the money, the 500 billion meant for debt relief, has reached the right people. In the very next sentence, he says how he's going to tackle and fight the people and get every single cent back that's been plundered and stolen. Companies that have overcharged, over 800 of them being investigated. How is he going to stop a repeat of that? You can go and read the rest of the article. I'm not going to go through all of that with you now. You can find it in the link below the video. I suggest that you study it. But one thing I can tell you is that firstly, based on evidence, with this whole coronavirus pandemic, people have looted and stolen that money, a lot of that money. So the fact that Cyril actually had to make a declaration as president and actually appoint a specific group of people to investigate the looting and plundering of the money, how can he claim that that money ended up in the right hands? He cannot make that claim. How can our country claim that they're going to spend the 7 billion the way the IMF wants them to? And what policy decisions will we have to make to suit their needs and their wants and whims? Because they are a part of the New World Order. They are backed by New World Order ideology and agencies and families and very powerful people. The IMF is part of the New World Order. How are we as the South African public supposed to have a recourse against this? These people are going to dictate to us what to do in future. And we know, because this money is intended for the coronavirus pandemic, that very soon people will be told, if you want to shop and enter the shop, you need to have a pass, either a health passport, an immunity passport, or a new digital identity. How on earth can we allow this if we want to remain free? These can all be part of the conditions that they put out there. We have not seen this letter. If I can find out what is in this letter, I will share this with you. But I'm deeply concerned with what is happening right now. We're being sold to the cleaners. And us as the people of South Africa, we need to prepare ourselves to be able to stand against this. Because we cannot have a government just putting us further in debt we didn't ask for. We cannot stand for this. Till the next video.